everybody. My name is Veronica Cartagena, and I am with the Bougainvillea House. We are a family therapy center here in Fort Lauderdale, and we work with teens, adolescents, up to young adults and families who are dealing with behavioral health and substance use issues. And today's topic, we will be talking about anxiety and depression.
Yes.
So today we have Rocio Morris.
Hi. I'll introduce myself a little bit. My name is Rocio Morris, and I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. I'm also the assistant clinical director here at the Bougainvillea House. I specialize in working with adolescents, teens, adults that are struggling with anxiety, depression, life transitions. Also, obviously work with families because that's a big component of how to heal from past experiences and how to just be successful in your mental health journey. So happy to be here, and like Veronica said, we're going to be talking about anxiety and depression and kind of looking at what are the differences, similarities, and kind of just how to cope with those mental health issues. So thank you for having us.
Great. So we are going to share our screen because we do have some slides that we would like to share with you.
All right. So so today we created a PowerPoint that will help you to kind of just look at things in a concrete manner of what we'll be talking about: depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues and aspects of those two diagnoses. So the first thing we're going to start with is just kind of like a basic look at the difference between good mental health and poor mental health. And so I encourage you that if you have a paper and a pen to kind of do like a little self-check list of what you feel where you're at with both of these sides. So when we're looking at good mental health, we're really looking at feeling good about yourself, right? That's kind of like the whole idea behind good mental health and a variety of areas of your life. So feeling good about yourself, that includes, self-esteem, self-confidence, feeling independent, feeling like you're comfortable with yourself, and not only in a physical way, but in a mental way. Also being able to express emotions in a healthy way. So I like to kind of compare it right away to the poor mental health side, because you'll kind of see the difference. But for poor mental health, someone may be struggling to share any feelings at all, or have a difficulty expressing their emotions and controlling those behaviors that come with those emotions. And so, for a good mental health, you're able to express your emotions in a healthy way, cope with them in a healthy way. Emotions are going to come and go. Like, that's for sure. They're going to come and go. That's the nature. And it's common for everybody to experience emotions on a high note and a low note. So really knowing how to cope with those is the idea behind good mental health. Kind of going along with that, also talking about being able to adapt and cope with change versus someone that can't accept change. So both of those are very important when it comes to, are you experiencing good mental health versus poor mental health. Being an active listener. It's like, you hear it like, oh, are you actively listening to your teacher? Are you actively listening to the person in front of you or your friend or whoever? This is more of an internal thing, right? So are you actively listening to your emotions, to your mind, to your brain, to what your body and your mind are asking in a healthy way for? So this versus somebody that may be ignoring or denying the problem, right? And so in order to have that good mental health, you need to be able to actively listen to it and manage that issue. So those are two differences there. And then finally, being an assertive communicator versus an aggressive or a passive communicator. And communication in itself is like a whole different world.
Absolutely.
But because there's so many aspects to that, and it honestly affects so many areas of life and your relationships. But being an assertive communicator is so important to have good mental health, because it's not about being aggressive, like the poor side, but being assertive just means saying things the way you mean them, the way you need them. It includes boundaries. It includes, you know, having those set lines where, you know, this is my thresholds and all that. So being an assertive communicator is basically just stating what you want and what you need. That's the most important thing, is like stating what you need and knowing yourself. So that's just a little, you know, if you were doing that checklist, kind of just an idea of, am I experiencing some good mental health things, or are there some things I need to work on, which is okay too. But it kind of gives you an idea of what good versus poor mental health looks like.
And we all experience one or more of those poor.
Absolutely, yes. And it can fluctuate. Yeah, exactly.
But it's just a matter of knowing, you know, when do you know that now you really need to seek some help?
So definitely I would say that, you know, if you find that, let's say you find that you checked off some poor mental health things, right? If you find that you're struggling in areas of your life,
Okay.
now your functioning is being affected, right? On a daily basis, your schoolwork, your communication with others, your relationships. If those things are being negatively impacted by some of the maybe behaviors you're doing, or just your mental health in general, if those things are being negatively affected, that's when I would say that, like, go seek help.
Yeah.
That would be kind of like the little thing, like, okay, I need to go do something about this. And of course there are things that you can do before, you know, you go and seek therapy. There are things that you can try, but again, if you're trying things and they're not really helping you, then that's when you would go seek help, definitely. So, you know, what brought us here today, anxiety and depression, we're going to look at different mental markers in regard to anxiety and depression. There are some similarities, but also, you know, there's some big differences. So when it comes to anxiety, worrying about immediate or long-term future is a big one, right? Anxiety is all about concerns, worry, and it's usually worry about irrational things. So, you know, so you're having concerns about things that may never happen in the future, or you're having concerns about things that are so far in the future that, you know, there's nothing you can do about them. So anxiety is a lot about worrying about things that you can't control, right? And a lot of people ask me, what is the difference between stress and anxiety? How do you know the difference?
Right.
So stress is very immediate, like there's a test coming up tomorrow and I'm stressed about it. But, you know, like that's something that you know is for sure going to happen. That test is going to come. You're stressed about it. Anxiety is more like maybe you are worried about getting into a car accident. That is like, you know, that
it hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. It could, but you know, it's not something that's set in stone, like this is gonna happen, right? So that's the biggest difference. Another thing with anxiety is you are experiencing uncontrollable racing thoughts. So constant thoughts about the same thing normally, or about the same topic normally, but over and over and over. Another one is when you avoid situations that can cause anxiety. So this would look like isolation, right? So if you have anxiety and you are worried, let's say, for instance, social anxiety. You know, you're going to be avoiding parties. And so you avoid situations, or maybe even talking to people. You avoid situations that can cause anxiety. And then ultimately, and this is similar for depression and very important to note, when it comes to anxiety and depression, thinking about death is a big one. So obviously, like we kind of talked about getting in a car accident, like, yes, there's obviously that thought about death, like, oh, I'm anxious about death, but also anxiety and depression can lead to someone feeling like suicide is an option. And so that's a big one for anxiety and depression, where that's when you really need to say, hey, I need to seek some help because these thoughts are getting out of my control.
Right.
So, you know, thinking about death or having suicidal thoughts or things like that are a big part of anxiety and depression. So moving on to depression, again, you know, there are some similarities with anxiety and depression, but depression looks a little more gloomy gloomy than anxiety, right? Like when you think about anxiety, it's fast paced, it's, you know, it's all of these things that we'll talk about a little more later on, but depression is a little bit more dark, and so feeling hopeless or believing it's not worth trying, right? Seeing no hope for the future, just feeling like there's no point. And that's why a lot of times it can lead to suicidal thoughts, because you're just saying, what's the point? So those are big mental markers. And feeling worthless. So a lot of people that experience depression also experience self-esteem issues because they just feel worthless. You know, hopeless and worthless are two big mental markers for depression. So if those are things that you or somebody you know are experiencing, then you're more than likely experiencing some sort of depression and should seek help for that. Okay, so throughout the presentation, we'll have some questions, and we'll kind of look at, you know, what's in the world of mental health today. So kind of what percentage of mental health disorders begin occurring during adolescence? So in thinking about that, you know, this is important because we think about, you know, how common is our mental health issues. So under 20, over 75, between 45 and 55%, or between 20 to 30%, depending on the disorder. So let's see how common mental health disorders are and when they kind of begin. So with that, you know, we're looking at 20 to 30% of people struggle with mental health in adolescence.
Right.
So at least 1 in 5 children in adolescence has a diagnosable mental, emotional, or behavioral problem just in Broward County. So that's a good amount of, you know, feeling like, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Right.
You know,
No, it's just like anything else.
right.
And that's what we keep forgetting about or avoiding. That mental health is pretty common.
Right, exactly.
So if we could just get rid of the stigma and not worry about, you know,
what it looks like, because it affects so many people. I mean, it affects everybody at one point or another.
Right.
But for the most part, that's something that's really troubling. It is pretty prevalent in our youth.
Yes, absolutely. So, and just looking at that, it's, you know, you think about, you know, where do I stand with that? So, but again, like Veronica said, you know, like we, at some point we all experience some type of mental health or emotional health or behavioral health problem. So it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're thinking, am I alone in this? No, you're not. Okay, so this one is, you know, social media, something that's extremely popular. But how has social media impacted mental health in teenagers? So has it decreased risk? Has it increased risk? Has it been no impact? So what do you guys think?
As we talk about it all the time, it's not going to go away.
No.
It continues to get better, and technology, you know, evolves every month probably.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And like, as that evolves, I do feel that, you know, people that are, you know, advertising things on social media or speaking on social media, that grows as well. And so I think that can come with dangers, but also good things. And so it's kind of just about you being insightful about, you know, who you're following, what you're viewing, because it does have an impact. You know, it has an increased impact because.
And that's what I was just going to ask you, because I'm sure most teenagers feel that there's no impact.
Right. No, there is. There is. I mean, and if you think about how much time you spend on social media and how much time people spend on social media, of course it's going to have an impact. And it's increased, especially during the pandemic, because of that isolation that we have been pretty much forced into. This is like our outlet, right? This is like us keeping in touch with the world is getting on social media. So definitely an increased impact and increased exposure.
Mhm.
So that's just like a fact, but it's more, now we have to think about, okay, so what does that mean for me?
Mhm.
How do I regulate that? And
Right.
so how do we cope with this increased exposure to social media and the impact it has on me? So what do? We regulate, who we're viewing, what we're viewing, the things we're reading. Are they positive? Are they supporting me as a person? So on and so forth. Like, are these things healthy for me that I'm putting into my mind?
Right.
So when it comes to coping with social media, it's, giving yourself a time limit, giving yourself some time away from that. So, there's also burnout, regardless if you
Right.
feel, like that there's burnout or not with social media, there is.
There
So
is. And it's really hard, especially now that whether you are in virtual school
right,
or hybrid,
right.
you're required to be more hours online.
Exactly.
And if we look at,
Yeah.
here's the trivia. So if we look at prior to COVID,
Yes.
Before COVID, how many hours would you say the average teen is on social media a day? Any guess?
An average hours
On a day.
I would say 5.
Okay, 8 hours.
There you go.
On average,
Yeah.
our teens are on social media 8 hours a day. Now, just to put that in perspective, that's
And that
a
was
full-time job.
That was before COVID.
That's before COVID.
Yeah.
So that is a full-time job.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. No, and I believe it 100%. But just like anything else, there's a balance, right? You have to have a balance. And one of the biggest things with social media is, like, if you find yourself that you're on it and it's taking over 8 hours a day of your life, then get out and do some exercise. Counteract it with some nature, with some fresh air, with some time doing other things, cooking, reading. There are so many activities, coping skills that you can use, because, obviously talking about anxiety and depression, sometimes you can find that isolating yourself too much on social media can lead to those things.
Right.
And so how do we counteract that? We use coping skills such as, finding other activities that are going to release endorphins, talking to somebody, like on the phone or just, going out for a walk with like somebody or a friend.
And that means talking, not texting.
Yes,
Not just texting,
exactly. Like using your voice.
Which I know it gets a little difficult sometimes.
Yes.
And the reality is we need to sleep.
Right, exactly.
Again, on average.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yes, we need to sleep. And if we're spending, all those hours on school online, and then we're spending 8 hours on social media.
And the one thing to remember that we get used to the amount of hours that we sleep or the lack thereof.
Right.
But our bodies need 7 to 8 hours a night.
Exactly. And that's a great point, because a lot of people they don't view sleep as a coping skill or don't view sleep as like a healthy habit. And it is. It's so important because it refuels our brain and it really creates clarity for us. So sleep is a great one that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's very much needed. So sleep and exercise are 2 big ones. Okay, so what are the signs to look for if you suspect a friend is struggling with depression? So for depression specifically, and obviously, observing a friend is important, but also this is for yourself as well. You need to do some self-reflection, insight, and see, am I struggling with that? But, if you find for depression, again, kind of like I said, it's going to be a little bit more on the gloomy side. So maybe the person is sleeping too much. They don't want to get out of bed. They're struggling to get out of bed. Or, sometimes we see if someone's sleeping too little. Insomnia is another sign of depression. That their body just doesn't sleep. And so that's a sign of depression as well. So sleep, talking about the topic of sleep is a big one when it comes to depression. Another one is eating habits. So this one, again, I think that the like lifestyle stuff is not talked about a lot. Maybe because it's just, you know, maybe a different, like, oh, go to a doctor for that or go to a nutritionist for that. But, you know, if you find that you or your friend or somebody, you know, you're observing is eating too little or too much, changing eating habits is another big sign that they might be dealing with depression. Isolation is a big one, and we'll see that again in anxiety. But when somebody is isolating themselves, we'll see it more with anxiety, but also with depression, because if you're not feeling, again, going back to that worthlessness and that hopelessness, if you don't want to be around people, you know, so, you know, if somebody used to be active and now all of a sudden they, you know, don't want to attend an event or they don't want to hang out as often as before, check in. You know, that might be a sign that they're dealing with depression.
What about for anxiety?
Yeah, so for
some crossover,
like we said, and isolation is a big one that crosses over. Too little of sleep is another one that crosses over. So when someone is struggling to sleep, that is normally caused by those racing thoughts that we talked about. So, you know, obviously, and I find that a lot of clients that we work with struggle with thoughts more at night. And I think that is because they have that time to have those thoughts. You know, you don't have any other distractions. So it affects your sleep. Another one with anxiety, again, this is total opposite of depression. It's going to look way more racy, way more like hyped than depression. So you're going to have sweaty palms, racing, and this isn't all the time, but these could be signs. Sweaty palms, racing heart, racing thoughts, jittery is a big one. And that's why a lot of times people say that, you know, try eliminating like caffeine and things like that from your diet especially when you are prone to have that racing heart and all of that for anxiety. So again, there are some things that you can do even before you attend therapy, such as changing your diet. Going for exercise is a good one because you're releasing that energy, because it's a increase of energy for anxiety. So those are just some signs when it comes to anxiety. So as you see, there are similarities between depression and anxiety, but there are also big differences. And so you'll kind of get an idea of, you know, if you're seeing these signs, what is it that they may be struggling with.
And the other thing is that we don't expect people to start diagnosing others.
No, please don't.
So the reality is, if you're feeling this, or you see one of your friends or someone
you know that is feeling, whether it is extremes of lethargy or that you're racing and you can't calm down, you know, don't try to figure out what it is. Just seek help.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, just to piggyback off of that really quickly, if you don't seek help or you don't say something to a friend, it could lead to risky behaviors. It could lead to, you know, behaviors that put your friend or you into trouble, and into danger. And so that's a big part of why is it so important to seek help, because you're protecting this person. You're protecting yourself. You're protecting a friend. So what are the top 5 leading causes of teen death between the ages of 15 to 19?
Can we take a guess?
Yes. Would you guys like to guess? We're going to tell you.
So here are the top 5 causes of death. And this is the age specifically between the ages of 15 and 19.
Yes, absolutely. And as you can see, which we have touched upon a little bit already, but suicide is number 2 leading cause, which is not a shocker. And I don't think it's a shocker anymore, specifically because of, I do feel that there has been more awareness when it comes to mental health. You know, obviously social media, like we talked about, you know, more famous people have come out and talking about it. And so I don't think it's as much of a shocker as it is like, let's do something about that. You know, it's now it's not about like, is it a thing? Is it common? Yes, it is. It's absolutely a thing, as you can tell. But now it's more about, what do we do? What do we do? When you hear something, when you see something, when a friend is sharing these thoughts with you, say something, you know, or if you are struggling with that, do something, seek help. You know, say, you know, just, we want to normalize the process of talking about these thoughts, because these thoughts should be something that you are comfortable with exploring so that you can heal from it and move forward from it. So suicide is very, very like a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately one of the leading causes of death. And so, you know, just being able to bring awareness and say it's okay to talk about it.
Right.
It's okay to do something about this.
And we don't want to wait until we are at this DEFCON 10 is the
Mhm.
problem.
And, you know, when we look at, again, how common it is to have some type of anxiety and depression, where we mentioned 1 in 5 kids here in Broward County, what's even more disturbing, only 50% of those kids are actually getting the help that they need.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that are not, whether they're not able to address the issue or they're scared to address the issue, or know where to go.
Right, exactly. Which, you know, that's another part that we'll kind of touch upon, is the importance of feeling like you have somewhere to go. So, but, you know, along with the suicidal thoughts, the suicidal, like, you know, intentions that people may be struggling with, there's also self-harm. So self-harm is something that is unfortunately, again, very common, especially in our teen population. And so here are just some, you know, some points that are risks associated with self-harm, just so that, you know, again, if you or a friend that you know is self-harming, you know, this is what we're looking at. You may be struggling with low self-esteem. You may be struggling with poor self-care. And those are two things that are totally, you know, you can work on those completely. Like those, they're two things that they're totally workable, and you can seek help for those things. However, when you get into the action of self-harming, it's likely that you repeat as a form of coping, which is not a healthy coping skill. You know, it's not solving anything. It's not letting you heal from anything. It's just a physical coping skill for whatever is underlying, whatever it is that you're dealing with that is causing you to self-harm. So
And self-harm is not necessarily tied to or related to suicide.
right, exactly. No, this can be something completely separate. You know, this is and unfortunately, you know, I mean, it's the last point on here, but yes, it could lead to, you know, accidental death. And so it's very scary, and it's not something that, you know, we want anyone creating a habit out of. And so if you or somebody you know is self-harming, then definitely seek that help. It could lead to, you know, other risky behaviors, permanent scarring, and even HIV, AIDS, hepatitis. So, you know, these open wounds are not safe, obviously on a physical level, but on a mental level too. So again, self-harm along with suicidality, like they both are things that, you know, if you're experiencing or someone you know is experiencing them, seek help. There are tons of resources now. 24-hour hotline, Google it. Like it's right there. You know, if you don't feel like you have somebody in your life that you can talk to, there is that. Obviously, we're here.
Right.
We would love to help. You know, but even if you're not 100% comfortable there either, there are anonymous resources that you can use.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first step is just reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And then finally, you know, this is super important to note, is how important a support system is. Support systems are very, very important when it comes to the success of your healing, of your coping with any type of mental health issue. So support systems look very different for everybody, but they can come in forms of a family member, a friend, a teacher, a guidance counselor, a therapist, a mentor, clergy, peer groups, and obviously other resources that are out there. We've mentioned a few, but you know, the suicide hotline is a good support system, because it's something that you don't even need to leave your house for at this point. But you know, even if you feel like you don't have somebody in your home, reach out to another support system that you can use, whether it's a friend, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a coach, you know, somebody that you feel one person that you feel like can support you, that makes a big difference.
And when we talk about a support system, it doesn't have to be someone who is a counselor, who is a specialist
Right.
for the first line,
Yes.
your first attempt to reaching out.
Exactly.
Sometimes, we talk about, two heads are better than one.
Mhm.
So, go to whoever is your go-to, whoever that
Absolutely.
friend, that family member, whoever that is that you're comfortable enough to reach out and speak to.
Yeah.
And then together you can find
Yeah.
the correct resources.
Exactly. Absolutely. The whole point is just building a support system.
Mhm.
That's it. Start from one person, and you'll see how that kind of domino effects into like, oh wow, now I'm creating a good support system for myself.
Yeah.
So
All right, well, perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. We hope that we got some good pointers here when we're dealing with
Absolutely.
anxiety and depression.
yes.
Again, remembering that it can affect every one of us at one point in our lives, and it is okay.
Mhm.
It's just being able to know when you need to reach out and
Yeah.
reaching out,
Exactly.
and then, and going from there.
Absolutely. Use your coping skills that you have. Tap into your strengths. Use those, and that's a good starting point.
Yes, and so be sure to visit us online, www.tbhcares.org. There's a wealth of resources there, and we're just a phone call away.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.